So, good evening, everybody. My name is Rich Malika, and we're here interviewing Mr. Timothy Feiri, who I've had the honor and blessing to know now for several years. And Timothy, just want to thank you for joining me today. And I want to start by asking you, what was it like for you, good and bad, growing up in South Africa under apartheid?
Well, it was the good part was I have this parents who raised me, being my aunt and my uncle. My father passed away somewhere around 1964, so I barely remember, or rather remember anything or know anything. And unfortunately, my mother, who was let me say, my father was an economist in South Africa, and he also suffered a great deal, to my understanding, because all educated black folks were subject to scrutiny and assassination, because they were considered to be very dangerous to enlighten or to share with others and so forth. My biological mother was a teacher, a high school teacher, and later became the school inspector. But for some reason, she never connected with me. She just hated me from birth, I would say. I tried everything you can think of to reconcile for something that I don't even know what it is, and it never worked until today. I mean, that was the bad part. But now my aunt adopted me, my father's younger sister, and the husband. They were very, very kind. They are the greatest human beings that I've known from the beginning to the end. However, they also were subject, of course, to a lot of harassment that was taking place in South Africa in terms of, relocation and the land being taken from them and so forth. These were great farmers. They were great commercial farmers. So I grew up in that environment of, farming and so forth.
I just want to ask you, for myself and for anybody listening, what is it like to have a limitation violently imposed that if you do this, if you get past this certain level, if you start to influence based on your competency, you're going to be punished and destroyed for it? But even just owning your own farm and minding your own business, you can randomly be woken up one day and said you need to leave.
That's correct, and that's what happened to what I call my parents. They were relocated 2 times. They were in after the Second World War. My grandfather was one of the volunteers who were then rewarded, by this farm, and it later was inherited by this aunt. And so the land supposedly was on top of what is considered to be the mineral pipes in South Africa, great diamonds and gold and platinum, which is all over the country, of course. So the South African regime was making sure, or they had a program of relocating and moving black people away from where the minerals could be. Find a dry land somewhere, just throw them over there, and that's what took place. And so this was very painful enough because it was limiting what you can do. There was no sense of pride. And I'm just talking about the land, but also there were regulations or laws that prohibit, like we could not, you could be arrested for being in a group of other 2 men, a group of 3 black man was considered to be an illegal gathering, and the policeman could just arrest you under what was called Internal Security Act, and they just lock you up for forever. No trial, no attorney. It will just depend on the circumstances and the mood and the location where you are locked up. You could be sold as a farm slave or anything, something like that. And in most cases, folks who would be arrested, they would not return home. Either they would be killed or they just disappear, and it was just a known issue. This was also including having the internal passport. We were walking around with internal passports in South Africa. And this internal passport, when the police stop you as a black man, it's supposed to have the registration of some kind of employment if you are not in school. And if you don't have either of that, you are going to be locked up forever. So the employment, so this would mean that if you were looking for employment, you would go to any farm or factory or whatever, have some white guy to, even if they don't have the work for you, they would, take your passport, your internal passport, and sign in one of the pages, because it was something like a big booklet. And they'll just put the date and say, yes, you were here looking for a job, they couldn't, and that way it will save you at least for the next 2 weeks. And that's how it was all the way. As a result, I was lucky enough because where I lived in the place called Rustenburg, it's a place with a lot of mines, platinum mines, gold, and so forth. So whenever there was a gap in between the schools and stuff, I would just go there and be employed. So I worked on and off in these mines. In the beginning, I was working underground, and as time goes, I started driving trained to drive the locomotives that was on the surface, hauling some minerals from the metallurgical sections and to the something like a railway station.
And I just want to ask you, because I think putting myself in the context of people disappear, we're subject to these people. How does fear, how does hatred, how emotionally was that growing up and living in that environment?
To be honest with you, this was the daily living. You couldn't come up and even all you can say is, hey, Timothy's not around, we don't know, they must have took him. So it was not even the news of the day, it was just the norm, hey, tough luck. Sometimes you see the bones of a skeleton of someone, or someone floating in the river, crocodiles tearing someone up. You don't know what really took place. They will throw folks in the old mine shafts, which are really deep in South Africa. It can be about 2 miles down and so forth. So the psychological effect of this thing was just enormous, and it was just the norm. You were just thankful when you survived for the day, and we knew that everything that you touch is almost unlawful. You could be arrested for walking on the pavement without taking your hat off when a white woman was coming across. That can be just a serious crime that land you in prison. So there were many, many things. Your survival was very, very thin, day by day, depend what you were doing. And we were also having a low-fast law that can also, that I mentioned before. So you can just be, arrested for low-fast law and you're gone. So it doesn't matter. And if you were to dwell in whatever the psychological effects, you would just commit suicide right away. Yeah. So
Did you see that?
no, I didn't, because we kind of developed the skill of surviving in this. And one of the things that early on, what I discovered was to learn the Afrikaans language so that I shouldn't feel, or rather, be treated like I'm abiding by the standard of the government of the day. In other words, if you were to say anything in English, you were considered to be rebellious. You are not conforming into. So the better you understand Afrikaans and you can speak Afrikaans, the better for you to survive. Even job-wise, if I were to come and say, hey, I'm looking for a job and so forth in Afrikaans, and you come speaking English or any other language, your chances are very minimal. Not only that, you are marked to be a rebellious, a black man.
I just need to say, in a day and age where I'm encountering people who seem, and I respect everyone's pain, but just really unnerved or unable to cope just with debate or conversations, to hear that you and everyone you knew was coping under that level of stress and developed a strategy for how to survive in it is one of the most remarkable things I've heard in my life.
Yes. Yes. I should also mention that church has been also a great instrument in the survival of the people, because there were the churches that we would attend to people's houses. We'll exchange. One day it will be at my house and this one's house and so forth, and that is like after hours in the evening, we'll just go there. This person will cook, and other people will bring the food, and we'll be just singing and just listening to the prayers. Folks will be praying, and so it kind of kept the folks alive, indeed. And that is on top of, there were churches, there were Lutheran, the Anglican, the missionaries have been there for ages. But the real connection and help and lubrication was in this underground, not underground, but the evening prayers that we had in around the village, when you were able to attend and so forth. But it was like a village thing that we are together in this. So there was this togetherness in everything that were being done. Like if someone passed away in a village, and you are seen going to your field to go and work, you were considered to be really evil and not complying. And there was no excuse. How can you not understand that today is a funeral of Timothy or whoever? There was this togetherness. The village was together, and unity was one element that would help this species to survive. Yes.
It just makes me think that the disconnection of community and the individualism here, coupled with the distancing from concepts of or relationship with the transcendent, it's remarkable what that brought to your community.
Yes.
And maybe that has a lot to say to us.
Yes, it does. Because the first thing that we know that the colonialists brought in, or rather implemented, was a divide and rule in a very serious way. Like South Africa has been under this was under oppression for more than 300 years. Now, during this time, there were so many wars that took place. And oftentimes, when you read history or you hear people talk, it sounds like the white people were fighting black people or vice versa. But actually, I would say 75% of the time, it was later on blacks on blacks because of the different tribes that the colonialists were able to divide. They were fighting. The Xhosa were fighting the Zulu, and the Tswana were fighting this one, and tomorrow this one will come, and it will be just battlefield, an ending one, and that is because of that. So, now this was a great tool of reversing that. When people realize that this thing is just going to destroy us even quicker, and this thing meaning this division. So we have to get together and be together, and trust one another.
Not that this would ever happen in the United States of America, but should there be forces attempting to divide people and put them against each other, and I said not in the United States of America sarcastically, how would you encourage communities to not fall into that trap? Because I know that there's old bitterness and rivalries, and they're easy to manipulate.
This is a huge subject, brother.
I agree.
First of all, in South Africa, after gaining this new dispensation, Nelson Mandela came with this Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
And let's back up for a second.
All right.
How did you enter into affiliation with Nelson Mandela and become a part of the resistance?
All right. After my second year in college, all the black schools in South Africa were closed because black children were refusing to learn Afrikaans as a medium language. In other words, we were supposed to do everything in Afrikaans language, whether mathematics, biology, and so forth. Now the issue was we cannot connect with the world outside if we are not doing this thing in English, and we're doing Afrikaans is only known in South Africa. It's a made-up language by the Dutch folks who came in South Africa. So all the schools were shut out, and meaning that we were all unemployed and not in school. Therefore, I had to go and join the mine. So I was then employed in the mine, and the main reason for me to join the mine was to go and work underground to rally around and get folks who are in the mine so that we can build this organization or continue to build the organization, Mandela Organization, African National Congress. So I joined the mine, and I became also member of the African National Congress, and my main focus was just getting folks and recruiting and so forth to get the folks out of the, and that was very successful. I was not the only one. We were many who were just working, especially the student, former student councils and so forth. We just dispersed, and this is what we were doing, working underground, and folks joined the ANC, and some decided to go in exile. And later on, I was then assigned by the organization to join the military, because there were different assignments. Some were being sent outside the country, some were doing this, some and so forth. So I was assigned to join the military, the South African Defense Force, so that I can work myself up in the Defense Force, and later on we can work, a coup d'etat, overthrow this government. And I agreed to that because I didn't want to go anywhere outside the country at the time.
Now, I need to say to you, when you say coup d'etat and overthrow this government, I get a panic attack and I'm not in South Africa. How, during that period of time, how was it all? Were you given the grace to just move in that without anxiety? Were you guys biting your nails every day? What was it like engaging in that?
Well, like I mentioned before, in whatever that you were doing, death was just so close to you. So whether you working in the mines, where the safety of these mines were, like zero, and the mines we were going down like a mile down or 2 miles down, and if the mine trapped people, there's no report, there's no nothing, nobody's account to anything, so anything could happen. Now, joining the defense force, I knew that I was at risk. I have to be loyal to, or look like I'm loyal to this defense force, but also the African National Congress must be sure that I'm not selling them out.
Right.
I haven't changed my positioning, so I had to balance this thing, and we're talking about a long journey here, because I had, from the basic training to become a corporal and sergeant and staff sergeant and sergeant major and so forth, I had to balance this thing and make sure that it reflects the right thing. And for me to be promoted in the military, I have to participate and look like I'm responsible in doing the right thing, and that's exactly what happened. But I knew that there's so much intelligence, folks going around and so forth, that can sell you out. I don't know which day the ANC might think that, this guy is a sellout now, let's hand him over to these sharks. But thank God everything worked out perfect.
So there's even fear of your allies because of the paranoia instilled by all of the double crossing and surveillance, and so it's not like when you go to a meeting you can rest easy in any place.
In any place, there was no rest at all, day and night. I mean, there can be assassination. Like I say, these guys, they can assassinate me and say, hey, we know that you're working for what was the terrorist organization then. And these guys from the ANC, they can come and say, oh, we had a report that now you are a sellout. And sometimes they don't even tell you. All they do is just, shoot you, and that's it. But like I say, I was very transparent. I was honest with what I was doing, and it really worked out perfect. But I knew that anything can be a D-Day in terms of being assassinated or eliminated. But death was the last thing that I was thinking about. Death was a sort of, finally, the escape, if it ever comes.
So it would almost be welcome.
Right, always welcome. That was, the very exit that will end everything if things don't work out.
Now, you said you weren't thinking of death. What were you thinking about? What was motivating you?
You mean thinking about what?
During that period of time, what was the prize you were keeping your eyes on?
Okay, the prize that I was keeping my eyes on was that one day South Africa will find the new dispensation, democracy, where we can just be together and enjoy the benefits of the land. I wasn't even thinking about getting rid of this colonialist who came and took over. It was so many years, generations after, during my time, that this thing has been taking place. So the best thing here is just to come together, work together, and just live peacefully. So that was the dream. I didn't know how soon that was going to be realized, but at least if I participate and do something about it, it will be maybe helpful for someone who will come up later. Mandela was already incarcerated. So many millions were already assassinated and killed for the same purpose. But this is the only way out. This is the only way to go. We just got to participate and do it. And that was and nothing less and nothing more.
How did you get arrested ultimately?
Well, after a number of years when I was, because any day I was waiting for further instructions from the African National Congress, my organization, to say, hey, we think this is the right time according to the great plan that, the grand plan that would be out there, that you should now execute this coup d'etat. And this happened in February 1988, or rather beginning of 1988. So I just got the information because there were, just random, this is an underground movement. So a person will just come and say, hey, this is instruction, and we want you to execute this not after this date. So I went in and, strategized and planned and see what strength do I have, how many soldiers can I get on my side, what kind of weaponry can I have, what would be the best day, time of the day, what are the targets within the country that I have to go for. And this took place then in February 8, 1988, that I executed this plan. I had about maybe 1,800 soldiers participating in this. I had weapons, from tanks and all that. I have a number of different ranks from the generals to colonels and captains and so forth, who were willing to participate after being, or rather convincing them in our underground meetings that this is important, we have to do this and so forth. I had quite few white folks involved in there, mostly Jews, because they were also hated by the Afrikaners, so I could get them involved and so forth. So the bottom line is, after we execute this coup d'etat, it didn't take long that the South African government was able to thwart this reverse the whole thing, and by doing that, arresting everyone who was involved. And they later realized or heard that Timothy, being myself, that I was the leader of this thing. I organized and everything. And so I was able to escape with my wife because we were targeted to be, and I didn't share. I was the sole planner of this thing. I didn't involve in, there was no committee and so forth. So I knew that if I run away, if I go outside the country, which was very easy for me and possible, the rest of the soldiers are going to be killed, firing squad. So I decided to hand myself over, in which I called, because I knew how the system works, so I called the right person so that they can come and arrest me. And they came and arrested me. A helicopter took me back to where, where I was locked up. And of course, I pleaded guilty that I am the one who planned and executed this, and no one here did. I gave them the instruction. I'm the one, and I had copies of everything. I showed them everything. So they were then charged with or their charges were lesser. They were able to get less sentences and so forth. So I was the only one who was charged with high treason, and that's how I was arrested there.
I just want to say that every time and I've heard your story several times,
Yeah.
but every time I hear something that I did not hear before,